Today, almost no one could endure a single night in the lands where the Vikings lived, a place where the sun vanished for months, where the wind cut like blades, and where the cold could kill in silence. But they didn't just survive. They tamed winter. While ice swallowed the world and the sky became only a shadow, the Vikings faced temperatures so brutal they could freeze the human body in minutes. No gas, no electricity, no modern shelter, only stone, wood, and courage. It was the forgotten North, where the sea turned to steel and the air shattered like glass, a place where warmth was a legend and death prowled in every gust of wind. And yet, night after night, these ice-forged warriors invented impossible ways to outwit the cold. They used nature itself as a weapon. They turned fire, animals, earth, and even the human body into shields against freezing. They uncovered secrets modern science is still trying to understand. Secrets that kept them alive through the deadliest nights in history. Today, you'll enter the cold, brilliant mind of the Vikings and see how far human instinct can go when the fire goes out. Think of the coldest night you've ever lived through, the one where the air slices your skin like glass, your breath turns to mist, and the silence of the cold seems to scream inside your bones. The car won't start. Your toes go numb before you even reach the door. Now, imagine trying to sleep in that. No heater, no electricity, just a cow beside you, and a roof made of earth and wood. This wasn't an isolated scene. It was daily routine for the Vikings. Temperatures dropped to minus 29 degrees Fahrenheit. No wool pajamas, no thermostat, no comfort at all. Only the human body, instinct, and centuries of wisdom about how to cheat death by freezing. But how did they do it? How did entire families, with children, sleep through near Arctic winters and still wake strong enough to chop wood, build ships, and face a frozen ocean? The answer is one of the strangest and most ingenious Viking survival practices. They slept with their animals. Inside every house, people and animals shared the same air. Whole families lived side by side with chickens, goats, sheep, even cattle. It may sound bizarre today, but to them it was pure logic. Cattle produced heat, and the Vikings built their homes, so not a single breath of that heat was wasted. Picture a great wooden hall. In the center, a flickering fire. Along the edges, sleeping benches against the walls, a low ceiling designed to trap warm air. And all around, animals, sheep, cows, horses, breathing alongside the family. A single cow could emit the heat of a 1,000-watt heater. Sheep worked like living blankets, radiating warmth through the night. Horses stayed near the entrance, not only for warmth, but as sentries, alerting the household to wolves and raiders stalking the dark. None of this was accidental. The layout was engineered with precision. Stalls sat a step lower than the main floor, so warm air rose to where people slept, while the cold stayed trapped below. But what's most surprising is that sometimes the Vikings did exactly the opposite of what seems logical to stay warm. Before bed, they lightly dampened their wool clothing and warmed it near the fire. The heat drew up visible, dense vapor, a mist that spread through the room and reduced the body's heat loss. That vapor also kept the air humid, preventing the respiratory tract from drying out in extreme winter. It was almost ritual, clothes hanging, steam dancing in the air, the fire crackling in the center of the house, a warm haze of instinct and necessity that turned lethal cold into breathable shelter. On top of that, many used pelts or blankets lightly greased with animal fat. Like tallow from cattle or sheep, that oily layer formed an invisible barrier, sealing in body heat and blocking the cutting wind. It wasn't comfortable, but it worked. The smell, the smoke, the sweat, the grease, all part of the survival formula. And you, if the cold were about to kill you, would you have the courage to fall asleep hugging a cow just to see the sunrise? But all this ingenuity would be useless if the walls weren't a fortress against winter. At first glance, A Viking house looked simple, wood on frozen ground. Look closer, and you see something far more complex. A survival machine built to meet the impossible. Now, let's step inside. The walls were strategic. 3 layers, each with a purpose. The first, inside, made of thick wooden planks, the warm heart of the house. The second, in the middle, a compacted mass of turf, compressed earth and roots. The third, outside, sturdy boards and planking, shaped to block wind and rain. That turf layer was the secret, dense, breathable, almost impenetrable. It worked like a natural insulator, the medieval equivalent of modern thermal foam. Between the grains of earth, heat hid and accumulated, captured in a silent embrace. The roof told the same story. Sloped under the weight of snow, it was covered with up to 24 inches of grass and soil, more insulation than many modern attics. It was the house's green shield, heavy, living, effective. The floor, packed earth, was blanketed with layers of straw, moss, and hides, keeping warmth in and cold out. With this design, a Viking interior could reach 41 degrees Fahrenheit, even when outside plunged to negative 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Not comfortable, but enough to live another night. Some houses were partly dug into the ground, using the earth itself as a thermal barrier. Cool in summer, warm in winter. In spring, the turf roofs even sprouted living grass, camouflaging the house as part of the landscape. Nothing drew attention. Nothing was left to chance. Even orientation was calculated, facing the winter sun to absorb as much light as possible. Passive heating long before modern engineering named it. Every crack was chinked with moss, the same method still used in rustic mountain cabins today, so the wind never found a path. Some scholars believe these homes rivaled the thermal efficiency of small modern houses, all without wires, without metal, and without a thermostat. Of course there was fire, but not the fire we imagine. Not roaring flames and excessive heat. The Vikings knew something many still ignore. Intense fire wastes energy, so their houses didn't have chimneys, not from ignorance, from calculation. They knew a chimney would pull the heat out, so they left only a small vent in the roof, enough for air to move slowly. Smoke escaped gradually, warming the roof from within and creating natural airflow. It's what we now call passive ventilation. For them, it was simply instinct. That dense, persistent smoke did more than warm. It preserved the beams, drove insects away, and filled the air with a heavy, almost invisible heat. Fire wasn't a spectacle, it was a companion, silent, steady. At night, a ritual began. The hottest stones were pulled from the hearth, wrapped in sheepskins, and placed beneath the sleeping platforms. Heated to over 150 degrees Fahrenheit, they radiated warmth for hours. Stone hot water bottles, keeping life going through the deadliest hours before dawn. Some hearths were shaped like shallow cones, spreading heat evenly, warming walls and floor at the same time. And when wood was scarce, as it often was, the Vikings turned to the unlikely. Dried dung, or blocks of compacted peat. These fuels burned slow, with little flame, just enough to keep the fire alive, and the people, too. To this day, in the ruins of those houses, the beams remain blackened with soot, as if holding the memory of every winter they endured. Every smoke stain is a silent reminder that inside those walls, the cold lost. If you found their transformation of the impossible into survival astounding, wait for what's next. Leave a like and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, where you live. Does the cold ever turn as brutal as the Vikings? Stay with me and let's see how far these warriors went to defy winter. Walls could hold the cold back, but never truly defeat it. Even indoors, it crept in, slipping through cracks, hiding beneath the floor, waiting for its moment to strike. That's where the Vikings proved they understood cold better than any people on Earth. The ground was the silent enemy. Cold air pools low, heavy, invisible, and sleeping on the floor was nearly a death sentence. The Vikings knew it, so they never slept on the ground. They built raised wooden platforms along the walls, high above the cold layer, and closer to the warmth that gathered under the roof. These platforms weren't simple beds. They were thermal refuges, some broad enough for entire families, others small and wrapped with hide curtains, true heat cocoons in absolute cold. Under the beds they stored firewood, tools, and food, insulated from frozen ground and warmed by the bodies above. Nothing was wasted, not even human heat. Some houses added sleeping lofts, high among the beams, where warm air collected like an invisible blanket. It was the safest point in the house, the space between fire and ice. What separated the body from the cold was a mosaic of survival. Layers of straw, hides, and dried birch bark, creating insulated mattresses that trapped every scrap of warmth. They knew exactly where to sleep, above the thermal danger zone. Sleep low and you die. Sleep high and you live. But Viking insulation didn't just come from below. They wore their warmth. They didn't sleep under blankets. They slept inside them, layer upon layer of wool tunics, fur-lined cloaks, linen undergarments, heavy trousers, sheepskin hoods, each piece trapping heat, each layer fighting the wind. Today we call it the onion method. They mastered it more than 1,000 years ago. Outer layers were windproof, felted wool, leather, fur. Sealskin was prized for its water resistance. Wolf and bear fur, near-perfect insulators. Cloaks were fastened with shoulder brooches, allowing quick layering without opening gaps, and showcasing their identity and pride. On their feet, wool socks or cloth wraps stuffed with moss and straw, natural insulators that stayed warm even when damp. Some garments were made with lanolin-rich wool, a natural grease that kept heat even when wet. Nature's Gore-Tex centuries before the modern kind. The Vikings didn't undress to sleep. They bundled in everything they had, turning their clothing into primitive sleeping bags. Archaeologists have found warriors in burial mounds, wrapped in multiple layers of fabric and fur, the same armor against the cold that kept them alive, carried with them into death. But Viking warmth didn't come only from clothing. It came from within. They ate to survive and to stay warm. Winter meals were dense, fatty, heavy, whale fat, seal meat, bone-rich broths, barley porridge soaked in lard. In the coldest months, up to 75% of their diet was pure fat. Not negligence, strategy. Digesting fat, it generates steady heat. It was an inner fire, burning slow, feeding the body like a living flame beneath the skin. Before sleep, they ate hot soups, fatty broths, collagen-rich portions. Every spoonful bought them hours of internal warmth through the night. They stored food in underground pits and barrels of butter, shielded from ice, and often they preferred raw fat, because they knew, without science, that it warmed more, a secret only confirmed centuries later. But their greatest heater wasn't fire. It was the human body. The body emits heat like a 100-watt bulb, and the Vikings understood this before anyone. They slept together, parents, children, elders, all under the same furs. What we now call shared thermal mass. More bodies, more heat, more chances to survive the night. A family of 4 could raise the indoor temperature by up to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to turn ice into survival. Even dogs slept with them, not as pets, but as living heat sources, an essential part of the equation between cold and life. For them, sleep wasn't rest, it was strategy. Every gesture, every choice, every heated stone, every hand-sewn layer of hide existed for one reason: to live until dawn. And when the sun finally tore across the horizon, they didn't hide. They sailed, without maps, without a compass, armed only with the instinct of those who had already beaten the coldest night on Earth. And somehow, they found a continent no one knew existed: America. All of this shows the Vikings weren't just warriors of the cold. They were engineers of survival, men and women who proved that human strength isn't in comfort, but in adaptation. They remind us that true warmth doesn't come from fire. It comes from the will to continue. And you, Did you already know Vikings slept with animals, used fat, and even their own body vapor to beat the cold? If this story made you feel the chill, the fear, and the genius of the ancients, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next journeys through ice and the shadows of history. And of course, share this video with anyone fascinated by legends time almost froze. That's how you help keep this flame alive, because telling these stories is our way of keeping the Vikings' fire burning. See you in the next dive into the shadows of the past, and tell me, which Nordic secret should we unearth next?